We continue now at the top of Daf Gimel Amud Aleph in Meseches Chulin. This is Chulin Daf 3a. On the previous summit, the Gemara was discussing the idea of someone who's tamei slaughtering an animal and using a long knife in order to make sure that he does not touch the animal, that he doesn't make it tamei. And the Gemara in the previous summit asked, so how is this individual tamei? If you're going to say that he's tamei mace, that would be problematic because the knife is metal, and there's a general rule, cherev harehu kechalal, that the cherev, the sword, takes the same level of tumah as the corpse. And so in this case, av hatumah, if the individual is an av hatumah, so letami l'sakin, so then he's going to end up making the knife that same level of tumah. V'yazal sakin u'tumise lebasar, and then the knife will go ahead and make the basar tamei, and so therefore it won't matter if he himself tries to prevent himself from directly making the meat tamei. Isn't it going to become tamei through the knife? And the Gemara continues and answers, Elo de'itmi b'sheretz. Rather, the case must be that the tumah over here is tumas sheretz, and if the guy became tamei through a sheretz, so then we're not going to have that problem, and we'll see Rashi in a moment. The Gemara continues, V'ba Yisem, if you want, we can say, Li'olam de'itmi b'meis. Actually, the case is he is tamei meis, uchagon, and for example, shebodak kromesh shalkana, he examined the stalk of a reed. What it means is he's not using a metal knife, he's using a reed. He made sure it has no nicks, v'shachat ba, and he used that for the shchita, for the slaughtering. The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, bakol shochtim bein betzur, bein bezuchuchis, bein bekromis shalkana. One can slaughter with anything. It can be a rock, it can be glass, and it can be the stalk of a reed. And Rashi explains, cherev hareu kechalal, the sword is like the corpse. Tumas shal meis haruuyos latame kli kagon mace. If you have any kinds of tumas mace which are able to make a vessel tame, for example, the dead body, v'hanogea bo, or somebody that touched the dead body, to have a mia av hatuma, the person who touched the dead body is an av hatuma. Im naga behem matchos, so if he touches the matchos, the metal, nasa kayotzebo, the metal assumes the same level of tuma. Vim naga b'meis, and so therefore, if the metal touches the mace itself, havi avi avos hatuma, it's going to be what's called an avi avos hatuma. Vim betame mace, if the metal touches a tame mace, that's somebody who himself, he touched the dead body. Naga, if that's what the metal touches, havi av, then the metal will be an av hatuma. Avol rishon v'sheni ein metam in kalim. Now, a rishon latuma or a sheni latuma, they will not cause kalim vessels to become tamei. That's only going to be true by an avi avos hatuma or an av hatuma. V'hai sakin nasa av, and so what's going to happen here is if this individual is tamei mace, the knife will become an av hatuma. V'hai cherev hareu kechalal, and the din over here of cherev hareu kechalal, that the sword is like the corpse, hachalo itzrich develav hachinami motzi metame basar degaver hava av hatuma. You don't need it that the cherev actually touched the corpse. It's enough that the cherev touched the individual who's an av hatuma, and then v'sakin rishon ubasar sheni, and then actually, even if you didn't have cherev hareu kechalal at all, even let's say there was no halacha that the sakin became like the individual, even if the sakin became a rishon, the basar could become a sheni, it could become secondary tuma. Eluribuza kamar, the Gemara is just going further and saying an added chiddush. The afilu rishon have a high basar, that this meat can actually become a rishon latuma because the individual is an av hatuma, and he makes the sword an av hatuma, and then the basar is going to be a rishon latuma. The itmi b'sheretz, and then the Gemara answered, the case is he's tamei sheretz. The ave high gavra rishon. Now if he's tamei sheretz, then the person is actually a rishon, because the sheretz is an av, and the person's a rishon, v'lo metame hasakin, and then a person, a rishon, is not able to make the knife tamei, she'ein kli mekabel tuma ela me'avat tuma. The general rule is that a vessel can only receive tuma from an avat tuma. Delo matzino b'torah de mekabel tuma me'rishon v'sheni ela ochel umashke. We only find in the Torah that something is able to receive tuma from a rishon and sheni. The only thing would be ochel or mashke, would be food or drink. K'dechsiv, as it's written in the Kol Asher B'socho Yitma, that's what it says in the pasuk. V'samach leim mikol ha'ochel asher yachel, and we learn from there ochlim umashke metame me'aver kli cheres. Food and drink, they can become tamei in the airspace of a kli cheres, of an earthenware vessel, shehu rishon, which is a rishon latuma. And so again, in a situation where the item is not an avatuma, where let's say it's just a rishon and sheni, that's only going to be metame, ochel, and mashke. Shehu rishon v'osa l'masha b'socho sheni. Again, that airspace is a rishon. It makes whatever is within the airspace a sheni. Ve'in kli metame me'aver kli cheres. A vessel cannot become tame in the airspace of a kli cheres. Shem hayakli nasan b'socho v'nitma hachitzon hasheni tar. If a kli would be inside it and the outer part becomes tame, So then we say again, it's going to be tar, that vessel that's inside. V'hachim afarish b'shili pirkin. This is explained at the end of our perek. And kromis shalkana. And then the Gemara said it could also be that he's slaughtering not with a knife, but with the stalk of reed. Pshute kliates. That's considered pshute kliates. It's considered a wooden vessel essentially that doesn't have a receptacle. V'lo makavli tuma. It's not going to be makavli tuma at all. And we will read the next Rashi as well. This is going on the next line in the Gemara. Abaya mahadra letrutze lechatchila v'diavad demasnis. And Abaya is about to try to answer the same question we were dealing with on the previous daf, which is what's going on in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says hakol shochten. It sounds like lechatchila all these individuals can do shchita, and then it says that the shchitas and ksheira, the shchitas kosher. That sounds like b'diavad. And Abaya now goes ahead and answers that question. And the Gemara continues. Abaya Omar Abaya says hachi katani. This is how you understand the Mishnah. Hakol shochten. Again, it says everyone can slaughter. Va'afilu kusi. It means to say even a kusi, which is a Samaritan. But medavarim amurim. And when is this true? Kishe Yisrael omed al gabav. It's true when there's a Yisrael, when there's a Jewish person standing over him. Aval yotze v'nichnas. But let's say the Jewish person is just exiting and entering. He's there a little here and there. So lo yishchot. So then lechatchila he should not slaughter. V'yimshachan. And if he does slaughter, chotech kezayis basar v'nosein lo. So then he cuts a kezayis of the meat and he gives it to him. Achlo. And if he eats it, then mutter lechol mishchita. So then already you know that he did a good shchita. It's mutter to eat from his shchita. But lo achlo. But if he's not willing to eat it, aser lechol mishchita. So then it is aser to eat from his shchita. Chutz mechereshot v'katan. And that's all with the exception of a chereshot v'katan, a deaf mute, an imbecile, and a minor. Ta'afilu diavad nami. Even there, even after the fact, lo, it's not allowed, because again, as we said on the previous summon, shema yishu, shema yidrusu, v'shema yachlidu. Maybe they delayed, maybe they pressed, and maybe they borrowed the knife. And Rashi explains, va'afilu kusi, even a kusi, mosrin lo behema lechatchila lishchot, one can give him an animal lechatchila that he should slaughter it. The mitzvah shechziku bohi, because that is a mitzvah which we know the kusim actually keep. Avol Yisrael yotze v'nichnas. Now, if the Yisrael is going in and out, lo yimsor lo lishchot, so then he shouldn't give the animal over to the kusi to slaughter. The afal gav dehuchzuku bali atzmam, even though they themselves are careful, ein makpidin im yochlu Yisrael nevelos. They don't care if a Jewish person is going to eat something not kosher. The leslu lifnei iver lo siten michshel, because they don't hold of the halacha of lifnei iver. Before the blind, we don't place a stumbling block. They're not concerned that they cause someone else to do an avera. Ela kemashmo shelo yiten even b'derech iver la'apilo. They understand that pasuk literally. It means not to put a stone on the road in front of a blind person who's going to fall. They don't understand that it's talking about averos, and so therefore that's why the Gemara said achlon. If you give it to the kusi and he eats it, so then mutter lechol, then it's mutter to eat it, because as Rashi just said, the hala atzmo zoyer, because we know that the kusi is careful. He himself is careful. V'hainu di'evid demasnisin, and that's talking about the after the fact of the Mishnah. But chutz mechereshot v'katan da'afilu di'evid namilo, with the exception of chereshot v'katan, there even b'di'evid it's a problem. Even after the fact, the ha di'evid kaiminin, because that line's going on the di'evid. Shemo yishu, again, maybe they delayed. L'kamon mefarash amay nakat lashon asid. Again, as we explained on the previous daf, later on the Gemara will explain why here it's using the future tense. And the Gemara continues and asks, according to Abaya's approach, again, the Mishnah said, v'chulan shashachtu, at the end of the Mishnah it said, in all of these cases, if they slaughter with someone watching over them, then it's valid. So ahaya, so what's that going on? Ilema chereshot v'katan, if you're going to say that we're going on chereshot v'katan, Allah koi. So again, the same question the Gemara asked on the previous daf, that's the line we just had right before, and so therefore it shouldn't say v'chulan, it should say v'im shachtu miboile. It should say if they slaughter. That would have been the proper phrasing if we're following that very line. Ela akusi. So rather you'll say we're going on the kusi. But the problem is ha'amrit. But we said by the kusi kishi Yisrael omed al gabav shachar afilu lechatchila, that if a Jew is standing over and watching, even lechatchila, it's not just b'di'evet after the fact. Even lechatchila, he's allowed to slaughter. And the Gemara says to that kasha, that is a difficulty with Abaya's explanation. And the Gemara continues. Amar Rava says v'yotze v'nichnas lechatchila lo. When a kusi is doing the slaughtering, let's say a Jew is not watching the entire time, but his yotze v'nichnas is going out and coming in, is that really not allowed lechatchila? V'atanan, but we learned in a Mishnah, and this is a Mishnah in Avodah Zarah, hameniach oved kochavim b'chanuso, if one leaves an oved kochavim, an idol worshiper, in his store, v'yisrael yotze v'nichnas, and the Jew is going out and coming in, mutter, so then it is permitted. And Rashi explains, Amar Rava says, v'hechad yisrael yotze v'nichnas lo yimsor l'kusi lechatchila. Bitmi, it's a question. If the Yisrael is yotze v'nichnas, the kusi is not allowed to do it lechatchila. V'atanan, but we learned in a Mishnah b'perek b'asra the Meseches Avodah Zarah. This is in the last perek in Meseches Avodah Zarah. Gemara, even though the Yisrael is going out and coming in, mutter, it is permitted, meaning alma mistafi ovid kochavim, we see the basic point that the Ovid Kochavim is afraid, Dilma Asi Yisrael, that maybe the Yisrael is going to come. Velo Nagan, he's not going to touch the barrels of wine which are being discussed over there. And so therefore that should be the same here. Hachanami here also. Mistafi, he's going to be afraid. Hashta Asi. V'chazile, that right now he's going to come in, he's going to see what I'm doing with the slaughtering. And so therefore Rav is asking that Yotzei v'nichnas should be sufficient. But the Gemara continues and says, Hasam over there in that Mishnah in Avodah Zarah, Mikatani Meiniach, it doesn't say one may allow the Ovid Kochavim to be in his store. It says Ha-Meiniach, one who does that. Katani, that's what it says in the Mishnah. And that's Di'evid, that actually sounds like it's after the fact. And so that is no proof, therefore, of a Lechatchila halacha. Rashi explains, Mikatani Meiniach, Adam Ovid Kochavim B'chanuso, V'yotze V'nichnas. It doesn't say a person can do this and be Yotze V'nichnas, the Mashma Lechatchila. That would be Mashma Lechatchila. And so therefore, this Mishnah does not pose any difficulty. And so the Gemara continues, Ella, rather, the difficulty is mehacha from over here, from the following Mishnah, also a Mishnah in Avodah Zarah. It says, Ein hashomer, the person who's guarding, he doesn't need to tzarech, he doesn't need lios yoshev u'meshamer, he doesn't need to sit there and watch. Again, it's talking about wine over there as well. Ella afa pisha yotze v'nichnas mutter, even though he's going out and coming in, it is mutter. And so you see again that yotze v'nichnas creates that permissibility. And so therefore, Ella my Rava, therefore, based on this, rather Rava says, explains the Mishnah as follows, Katani, this is how we understand the Mishnah. Hakol shochten, everyone can slaughter. V'afilu kusi, even a kusi. Ba'amed devar mamurman, when is this true? Kashi Yisrael yotze v'nichnas. It's true. If the Yisrael is yotze v'nichnas, that is enough. Avol bo mitzo shashachat. But if he comes and he finds that he already slaughtered, chotech kezayis basar v'nosin lo, then he cuts some of the meat, a kezayis of the meat, and he gives it to him. And achlo mutter, if the kusi eats it, it's permitted. Then lechol mishchita, so then it's permitted to eat from his shchita. Lo achlo, if he doesn't eat it, aser lechol mishchita, so then it is forbidden to eat from his shchita. And so therefore, essentially, Rav is explaining that part of the Mishnah as talking about Yotze v'nichnas. And then the Mishnah continues, Chutz me chereshot v'katan, with the exception of chereshot v'katan, diafilu diavinamilo, there even after the fact it's a problem. As we said, shema yishu v'shema yidrusu v'shema yachlidu, again, they may do the shchita improperly. And according to this explanation, v'chulan shashachtu ahaya, the line in the Mishnah which says kulan shashachtu, it's all going to be okay if someone is watching over. What's that going on? Again, ilema chereshot v'katan, if you say it's going on chereshot v'katan, alo koi, that's the line that we're just leaving off from. And so therefore it shouldn't say v'chulan, it should say v'im shachtu mi boile, it should say if they slaughter. That would have been the proper way to phrase it. Ella akusi, rather, you're going to say that we're going on the case of the kusi. But the problem with that is, you just said that even yotze v'nichnas is enough to slaughter lechatchila. Now at the end of the Mishnah, you're saying if they did it, b'di'evet, have someone watching over them. That doesn't make any sense. And the Gemara therefore says, kasha, indeed, that is a difficulty. And the Gemara continues with another explanation of the Mishnah. Rav Ashi says, hachi katani, this is how to understand the Mishnah. Hakol shochten, all can slaughter, v'afilu Yisrael mumar, even a renegade Jew. That refers to a Jew that violates specific commandments. The Gemara says, mumar lamai, what is he a mumar to? What specific commandment is he violating? And the Gemara suggests, lechol nevelos l'te'avon, we're talking about one who eats non-kosher, but he does it for gratification purposes. He doesn't do it to rebel against HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Uchid like Rava says, the Amar Rava, because Rava says, Yisrael mumar, if you have a renegade Jew, ochel nevelos l'te'avon, who eats nevelos l'te'avon, again, for gratification. And Rashi explains, going back to the quoted Mishnah in Avodah Zarah, ein hashomer esayayin sarach sheyeh yoshev u'meshamer, the one guarding the wine doesn't need to sit there and watch. Rashi notes, Reisha aseifa lo tikshi, don't ask a question from the first Mishnah we quoted to the later Mishnah. The lo zu af zu katani, the way to understand it is not only this, but even this. Kolomar, the Mishnayos are saying, lo b'di'evet dafka, it's not only okay after the fact, ela afilu lechatchila, it's even okay lechatchila in the first place. Rav Ashi Omar Goris, and then the proper text is Rav Ashi says, l'teyavon, that's a mumar lechol nevelos l'teyavon, ki lo mishkach heter achel nevelos, if he doesn't find permitted meat, then he eats nevelos, that's what it means l'teyavon. Ume'achar sha'asakin beduka, as we'll see in a moment, in a case where you give it to such an individual, if the knife has been checked, when as soon as biyadu, it's in his hand, shachet shaper, so he's going to slaughter properly. This is a type of individual, if he can eat what is permitted, he won't eat what is prohibited. Now, if he doesn't have a knife that's been checked, he's not going to go trying to look for a better knife, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Gimel Amid Beis.